Hello, my name is John Revelos, and I have a few words to say about numbers. In fact, let's start there. The odd difference in the way we treat words versus numbers. It's not uncommon to hear people unabashedly claim, I'm not really a math person. I've never been very good with numbers, almost with a sense of pride. Now, imagine the reaction to someone who loudly and proudly announces, I've never really been a word person. Vowels, consonants, syllables, it's all just too confusing. Why is it that illiteracy is treated as a crisis that must be addressed, but innumeracy is brushed off as no big deal? Number numbness is a problem hiding in plain sight that should concern us all. Why does this matter? Consider some of the figures that are routinely included in government reports about annual budgets and the national debt. How about the size of corporate profits and wage inequality gaps? Without having a comfort with numbers, we're all at a risk of being ill-equipped citizens and consumers. For instance, imagine a surgeon who, within the same pre-op consultation meeting, says the planned procedure has a 1 in a million chance of risk, is 99% safe, usually goes quite well. How comfortable would you be? How comfortable should you be? Would you immediately recognize the potential need to find another doctor? But just how common of an issue or problem is this? Social media and mainstream news are filled with evidence that our collective number sense is broken. Here are just a few examples.
Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads, U.S. population 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is there's too much money in politics.
At first, I thought these two respected journalists were calling out the math error in the claim. $500 million distributed among 327 million people would be just about $1.53 each. The claim was only off by $999,998.47. But it turns out they just blindly accepted the tweet and joined in the misplaced outrage. A few years ago, A&W Restaurants retracted an ad campaign regarding their new bigger hamburgers because customers thought that because the 4 1/4 is bigger than the 3 1/3, a quarter pounder was bigger than a third pounder. Take a listen to this argument regarding healthcare legislation made by Texas Representative Pete Sessions from the floor of the House of Representatives.
Mr. Speaker, in Texas we have a law that's called the deceptive trade practice. And if this were being done in Texas, it would be against the law because this is deceptive, what we are talking about here today. What is being sold is deceptive. We're hearing about the 35 million Americans that will be covered, but the other 23 million that will not be covered, they are not talking about. And secondly, they are not talking about the $500 trillion worth of physician reimbursement that is not included in this bill. And if people think you've got insurance or you can change insurance just to give everybody coverage, if you don't have a doctor to go to who can be paid for, then you won't get time to see the doctor.
500 trillion? Really? More than 73 times the entire U.S. budget of the previous year? Finally, consider the savings the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX fame, claimed it found in a single government contract that was actually overestimated by 1,000 times. Million, billion, no big difference, some might say. But consider that if you spent $1 per second, it would take a little over 3 months to go through $8 million, whereas it'd take over 257 years to reach $8 billion. Not a minor rounding error at all. It's almost as if Dr. Evil from Austin Powers isn't a movie character when it comes to understanding the differences between millions, billions, and trillions.
And we hold the world ransom for $1 million. Why make trillions when we could make billions?
Let's take a few moments and test the strength of your number sense. What is your knee-jerk sense of how long it takes for each of the following to tick by? 1,000 seconds? 1 million seconds? 1 billion seconds? 1 trillion seconds? Go ahead, make a quick mental estimate for each. 1,000, or 10 to the third, take about 16 minutes and 40 seconds to tick by. 1 million, or 10 to the sixth, will take 11 and a half days. 1 billion, or 10 to the ninth, will take 32 years. And 1 trillion, or 10 to the 12th, will take 32,000 years. How close were your estimates? Consider where human history would sit if the age of the Earth were described in the following terms. If we were to drive from LA to New York as a timeline of the Earth's history, humans would appear when we arrive in the middle of Manhattan in New York City. The entire span of written human history, from about 1,000 years before the building of the pyramids to the beginning of the 3rd millennium AD, would be much smaller than a single city block. In fact, it would be about the width of a modest storefront, or about 15 and a half feet. If instead, the timeline was a football field, the period representing from when cavemen first roamed the planet to today would take up the thickness of a single blade of grass in the far end zone. Think about this. If you were given $1 million per day since January 1st in the year 0, how much money would you have today? You'd have accrued about $750 billion, or about 739 billion. Now that's some serious cash for sure, but that would only cover about 11% of the 2021 US budget of $6.82 trillion. Finally, imagine a line on a 10-foot wide office meeting room's whiteboard with 2 marks at each end, 0 on the far left and 1 trillion on the far right. If I gave you a thin marker, where would you place the mark for 1 billion? Where would you place the mark for 1 million? The line for a billion would be about 12 1/100ths of an inch from 0. That's a little bit more than the width of 4 mechanical pencil leads, or 120 human hairs. The mark for a million is effectively indistinguishable from the starting line. 1 million would be located 12 100,000ths of an inch to the right of 0. In human hair terms, that's about 1/12 the width of a single strand. So, what are the root causes of this issue? There are several candidates. One is that most of our relationships with numbers are broken relatively early, due to K-12 education being lockstep and driven by age rather than by competency. If you didn't quite get your elementary school math, you'll likely be playing catch-up through middle and high school and have a lifelong distaste and fear. Another is that most math instruction lacks much real-world context or applications. so there's very little whiffum, or what's in it for me. Also, math and numbers are treated as complex in the media, so the suggestion is that it's all beyond the mental capabilities of the common person. And finally, humans naturally struggle with comprehending extremely small and large numbers. So, we can agree it's a problem, but what can be done to fix it? First, we should work to develop a sense of exponential comfort. Watch videos like Powers of 10 by Charles and Ray Ames, which takes you on a tour from 10 to the negative 16th meters to 10 to the 25th meters in 42 steps. Next, use common objects to make sense of very large and very small numbers. For instance, consider a ruler to help contextualize the enormity of the speed of light and the amazing smallness of 1/1000th of a second. 1 foot is about how far light can travel in a nanosecond. It can be useful to create a list of these common objects to form understandable touch points for the first few orders of magnitude up and down from a standard baseline like 1 meter, 1 yard, or 3 feet. Build up your comfort with simple percentage calculations. For instance, if I have a dog that is 10 pounds and you have one that's 20 pounds, my dog is half, or 50%, the weight of yours. But yours is twice, or 200%, the weight of mine. A tax hike from 1% to 3% is a 2% relative increase, but it represents a 300% absolute increase. Occasionally, do some quick research and back-of-the-envelope calculation checks the next time you hear a news report that doesn't seem quite right. As an example, back in the early 1990s, there was a report that shoplifting and employee theft cost the nation approximately $500 billion annually. How would you check if that claim is in the ballpark of being correct? The U.S. population in 1989 was about 250 million people. So some quick division would uncover that the claim would translate into about $2,000 of theft for every U.S. citizen, including babies and senior citizens. Something sounds a bit off about this. Even if we make the generous assumption that only 1 in 10 people are shoplifters, that adds up to over $20,000 per thief. Approaching it from another direction, the total retail sales in the U.S. in 1989 was about $1,500 billion, or $1.5 trillion. A $500 billion claim would mean that shoplifting accounted for about 1/3 of the total sales for the entire year? That seems highly unlikely. Yet another approach might focus on the fact that crime statistics show that the number of U.S. shoplifting offenses in 1989 was less than 1 million, about 983,000, with an average value of $104. If we round these figures to 1 million offenses at $100 each, that would add up to $100 million of economic impact. Acknowledging we aren't accounting for employee crimes, the difference between the $500 billion claim and the $100 million calculated amount is $499.9 billion, an overestimation of almost 5,000 times. Finally, for fun, calculate some really absurd things to help refine your number sense and put big and small numbers into a relatable context. So, with a little effort, it's not hard to transition from fearing or being intimidated by numbers and math to developing a sense of comfort and empowerment. We can all move from number numbness to number nimbleness. Good luck.